continue St. Francis de Sales' introduction to the devout life. We are in part 3, looking at the different virtues, and we are in the midst of several chapters looking at the virtue of friendship. He introduced us to friendship in the previous chapter, noting that there are false and true friendships. We need to know the difference between them. And it basically has to do with what is communicated between the persons. Is that good or bad that will create false or true friendships? So in this chapter, he's going to look at a specific kind of false friendship, that of flirtations or fickle love. He says, flirtations are foolish relationships between persons of the opposite sex without any intention of marriage. By these, the hearts of men and women are taken up, engaged, and entangled with one another in useless and foolish affections. So he's speaking of these kinds of playful or flirtatious words that begin to arouse these desires within the individuals for one another, but they really have no intention of entering into marriage. And oftentimes these will be the basis of a very destructive relationship, or destructive relationship towards the good relationships that they should be fostering in their life. He says those affected by this folly may sometimes spend several years without anything directly contrary to the chastity of the body. They remain with only soaking their hearts in desires, sighs, flirtations, and such are their foolishness and vanity. So that's often why, people don't see this as anything bad, because they're like, well, I'm not committing adultery on my spouse by engaging in these, or this relationship that I have, it's not like we're engaging in sex outside of marriage, but it can be very dangerous because it's going to arouse those things within us. He says that they are evil as they lead to and finally end in sins against chastity. They steal away love and consequently the heart from God, from their wife, from the husband to whom it belonged. So this is the kind of friendship that lead to affairs, for example. So it's can be very dangerous. And even though it may start and look as though it's not contrary to chaste love between God or with God or your spouse, the one you should be faithful to, it actually is a kind of unchastity, because that individual is seeking emotional support or to feel good from somebody else. Especially can occur when maybe a marriage itself is kind of rocky at that point. St. Francis quotes St. Gregory of Nazianzen, who says, "The person pleased with your beauty will be pleasing to you. You will return glance for glance and look for look. Soon smiles and little words of love will follow. Let loose stealthily in the beginning, but soon you'll become familiar and pass on to open love-making." So he talks about this kind of path that it can draw you away. He says that the person pleased with your beauty will be pleasing to you. So maybe, for example, you had a fight with your spouse, or they don't always seem to appreciate you. And now here is somebody maybe at work or that you meet that really pays attention to you, listens to you well, that maybe the spouse is not doing at that time. And so then that can begin to draw you away into this other relationship that you're not free to pursue. This fire of love is more active and more penetrating than it appears to you. You think of receiving only a spark of it, and you will be astonished to see that in an instant it has seized your whole heart, reduced all your good resolutions to ashes, and your reputation to smoke. So he's saying that this kind of love, the desires that it brings within us, can be quite strong. It's not something that we are easily able to control, and so we don't want to engage in these kinds of flirtatious relationships, because we may find that it leads us to a place where we didn't intend to go in the first place, but now our reputation, our life has been destroyed because of those desires have drawn us to. He's very strong when he speaks about this, because he desires people to not fall into this trap. Foolish and senseless people, do you think of taming love so as to manipulate it at your will? Do you wish to play with it? It will sting and bite you grievously. So this is not something that we can easily control once those passions have been aroused within us, and that bond or attraction, that false connection has been formed. He says love is a very good thing, but we cheapen it with such relationships. We have scarcely enough love by which to love God, and to think that we waste it on those. Yes, that is a waste of the love that we should be giving, the time that we should be offering to our relationship with God, to relationship with family, to a spouse. They cause so many temptations, distractions, suspicions, and other consequences that the whole heart is trampled down and spoiled by them. In short, these love affairs banish not only the love of God, but also the fear of God, weaken the spirit, and spoil the reputation. It is, in one word, the plaything of the court, but the plague of the hearts. So, in his time, it might be, within the courts, you can imagine the playful relationships that people engaged in between those of power and importance, but the destructiveness that could cause between them. So that's the same thing. It's really the plaything of our world. It doesn't really see anything wrong with all of this, but in actuality, he says it's the plague of the heart. It's a disease that's going to destroy our ability to love truly and maintain the friendships that really come from God. God bless.